What's going on, guys? Phil here from Custom Offsets TV on the YouTube, and again talking about something that I have talked about before, but it seems like no matter how many videos we make, everybody has questions on spacers. So today we're bringing you the truth about spacers. So before I jump into it and kind of explain what these things are, how people are using them, why they're using them, pros, cons, etc., all of that, you kind of have to understand the difference between a spacer and an adapter. So if you go on our website, you go to the online store, you click on the spacers and adapters section, they'll actually show you two different spots where you can select whether you need a spacer or an adapter. And a lot of people will interchange these names all the time, and some people will say, well, an adapter has studs. It can still be the same bolt pattern, but if it has studs, that's an adapter. Other people will say, no, it's still a spacer. So it doesn't really matter what you call them. We made it super simple to figure out what you want. So essentially, what it boils down to is a spacer is going to be that piece of metal that pushes your wheel further out and doesn't change the bolt pattern, where an adapter is going to be something that changes your bolt pattern and inherently also pushes your wheel out because you need all that material so that you can do the bolt pattern change. So that's out of the way, so now you know the differences between the two. So essentially what I'm talking about here is primarily adapters, but we'll cover spacers as well. Not as popular in the truck world simply because most guys are running spacers to do things like level out their stance front to rear. So it requires something like 1 3/4 or a 2-inch spacer, rather than like in the car world, you'll see like 10mm or 15mm spacers, which is literally just a piece of typically machined aluminum. That's pretty simple. You just slide it over your factory studs and then bolt your wheels up and you're good to go. So a little different in the truck world, where a lot of them have studs put into them as well. So you bolt them onto your truck and then they have studs sticking out of there, and then you bolt your wheels onto the spacers, but that's enough mumble jumble. We'll get into it. So I think one of the biggest negative comments that comes up every time we post a spacer video is, why wouldn't people just buy the correct size wheels right off the bat? And to some extent, those people are right. If you bought the correct size wheels, you wouldn't need to run spacers. But at the same time, not everybody is a genius when it comes to figuring out wheel fitment. Now, we have the gallery, which you guys can all use to figure out exactly what fits your truck. But sometimes, you know, trucks can vary depending on if it was in an accident or simply the time frame that it was made in. There is slight, tolerances that they allow at the factory. So you might have something that looks a little bit different than somebody else's, or doesn't fit quite the same. So if you order a set of 20x10 -24s and then you put them on there and you realize that it doesn't stick out as far as you'd like, you have a couple of options. Typically, manufacturers will not allow you to return wheels once they've had tires mounted on them, and especially not when you've mounted them on your vehicle and driven on them. So that kind of leaves you with just buying spacers if you want more stance, or you have to sell your current setup on Craigslist or something like that, and then go back and buy the 20x12s so that you have a wider wheel with a more aggressive offset to stick them further out. So that's probably the first reason why people buy spacers. Another really, really common one that I kind of mentioned before is to flush up your stance. So that's loud.
Yeah, what are they wheeling around?
I don't know. Anyway, on most knuckle kits where you're getting a new knuckle to lift your vehicle, it's going to increase the front track width, typically by about 1.5 3/4 per side. So your front wheels stick out further than your back wheels. The back wheels won't stick out nearly as much. So most people then are buying spacers again to only install on the rear. So they're just buying a pair of spacers to push those back wheels out so that the wheels stick out the same front to back. And that's really just an appearance thing. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with performance. It's just more to get that perfect look so that your setup looks square all the way around. Lastly, as far as why people would run spacers, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to what spacers do, because a lot of people will ask, like, oh, what size spacers do I need to run these wheels? And most times you don't need spacers. Spacers are not a requirement to run wider wheels. That actually makes it more difficult to fit wide wheels, because you have a 20x12 stuffed in there, then you add an additional 2-inch spacer, you're pushing it further out, which means it's gonna smash into your front bumper, it's gonna smash into your rear fender, or the rear of your front fender. So you actually don't need spacers to help with your fitment. It, in most cases, will actually hurt your fitment and make it more difficult. Where spacers are required for fitment is if you're rubbing on the inside components, so like on your upper control arms. If your tire, when you turn it, say you go full right, and now the front part of your driver's side tire hits your upper control arm, that's going to be a time where if you add a spacer to that wheel, you're now going to push it out further so that when you turn it back in, you now miss those upper control arms. So that is a situation where you might need spacers for fitment reasons. Another thing related to fitment would be brake clearance problems. So if you put your wheels on and your spokes are hitting your brake calipers, that's going to be another thing where typically you can put a spacer on there to push it out, and that'll get those spokes away from your wheel. Now, if your brake caliper is rubbing on the inside barrel of your wheel, that's not going to be something that a spacer can fix unless you had like a tapered barrel, but you're not really going to see that, because if it's hitting on that, that just means your overall wheel size is too small. You can't put 17s on a Power Stroke because the brakes are huge, so you got to go up to like 18s or 19s or 20s and just continue to go up from. If people aren't making negative comments about why people are running spacers, there's going to be somebody out there making a negative comment saying that spacers are not safe. And I can stand up here and I can honestly say to you that many of our guys run spacers on their trucks and we don't have problems with them. Now, if you install them improperly, whether that be over torquing or under torquing or just not torquing them at all, you may have issues with your spacers. It's really important to have them torqued to the proper specs, and as well as having your wheels torqued onto those spacers at the proper specs too. But in general, spacers are safe if you're buying quality spacers. So we usually say eBay spacers are not a good option, but when I say eBay, I don't mean that every single spacer on eBay is not a good option. There are plenty of people out there that do sell quality parts on eBay too, so don't misunderstand me when I'm saying eBay or Amazon spacers. What you need to look for is something that's going to be hub-centric or lug-centric. So basically what that means is the center bore of that spacer is measured out perfectly to fit on the bore of your truck. And then the bore of the part that the wheel attaches to is bored out perfect for that wheel. So that's going to get everything sitting on there nice and flush, of no vibration issues, you bolt it up, and you're good to go. The lug-centric thing, again, is important as well, because you can, if you center it on the lugs, you know it's centered on the hub. Just having that hub-centric ring that's machined in there, or whether you'd be running the plastic ones too, that's a whole other explanation. But you can, as long as it's sitting on there nice and tight, you're going to have no problems running spacers, because there won't be any vibration, it won't be off center, and you should be absolutely fine running spacers. Plenty of guys here do it, we don't have problems. If you have a family, you can feel fine putting them in a vehicle that has spacers on it. The biggest complaint with spacers is that they take so long to make because spacers are made to order. So there's a couple of things that we have done to help out with that. If you still want a custom spacer made exactly to some weird specifications because you drive a vehicle that's rare and have wheels that are rare, and you want a bolt pattern change and you want to go from 8 lug to a 6 lug or something like that, but you don't ever want to go 6 to 8, that's backwards, don't do it. We can still do that for you, absolutely no problem. But we've eliminated some of the pain of waiting so long, because it can easily take like 8 weeks for some of these spacers to be made. So what we've done is we've stocked all of the really, really common ones. So a lot of those like 1 3/4 or 2 inch for your Chevy Silverado. Wow, I really feel like I butchered that, Chevy Silverado. We have those in stock. So now they ship out, you know, in 1 to 2 business days, and it takes whatever, 5 business days for the mail to get them to you, depending on which carrier takes it. But in general, you get them way sooner now than you used to. So that kind of takes care of the problem of people waiting for their custom-made spacers. They're still made specific for vehicles. We just now stock them. So we basically bought a whole pile of them, put them in the warehouse, and now we're shipping from stock rather than waiting for them to be made. So that's it. That's the truth about spacers. That's what we know about them. We have a ton of videos on spacers on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/CustomOffsetsTV. So make sure you check those out. Hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. Come check out the website. Come check out spacers. We got wheels, tires, suspension, spacers, lighting, everything you need for your truck, all at CustomOffsets.com. That really felt like a sales pitch, but that's kind of my job. Peace.